Hey, welcome in.
Welcome to the Arrowhead Addict podcast.
We are here coming to you live.
The Kansas City Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. You only win a Super Bowl 2 times every 5 years, right? Oh! The warm-up act is over. Let's bring in Melissa Etheridge, massive Chiefs fan. Melissa,
Super Bowl champion, 2-time Pro Bowler, and Trent Green. Trent Green, how you doing?
Hey, what's going on, guys?
And he picked it up! He picked it up! He's gonna
and we'll see you next week. But until then, as always, go Chiefs. Hey, welcome into the Arrowhead Addict podcast. It is Thursday. Patrick Allen here with you, as always, to talk a little Chiefs. And boy, things are heating up, man. We got free agency coming up next week. The Buffalo Bills are blowing up their entire team. They're cutting everybody. The Broncos are taking on a $80 million cap hit and are cutting Russell Wilson. If you're a Chiefs fan, I don't know how you're just not enjoying the hell out of everything that's happening right now. Yeah, like there's a little bit of angst about the Chris Jones contract and what's going to happen with L'Jarius Sneed. But, I mean, other than that, you're 2-time back-to-back defending Super Bowl champions, and you get to sit back this offseason and watch the rest of the NFL, particularly these teams in the AFC, who have just, for the last couple of years, been doing everything they can to try to keep up with and unseat the Kansas City Chiefs. That's why you're seeing this in Buffalo. And if you're not up on the latest news, and we're going to get to all of that, and we got a great show coming for you. So let me pause. We got a great show coming for you. We got Price Carter from Arrowhead Addict. He's our draft guy. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the prospects on the offensive side of the ball that we think the Chiefs should pursue, mainly Price, because he knows all of these guys. He's going to be able to get you some really fantastic information. And we'll talk about some of the other breaking news and things that are happening around the league right now. All right, so back to the Bills, though. So the Bills just cut like a ton of really good players. I'm going to pull it up right now for you. And it's just absolutely wild. Now, why and why did they have to do this while I'm pulling it up? Well, the reason they had to do this is because they went all in to try to beat the Chiefs. Everybody thinks, right, if we just had one more pass rusher, if we just had one more corner, if we just had one more receiver, we might be able to get by Patrick Mahomes. And it didn't work. So the Bills were so far over the cap, they had to cut Mitch Morse, our old pal, Jordan Poyer, Nyheim Hines, who they traded for, by the way, and barely ever used, Deontay Hardy, Ciaran Neal. I mean, Tre'Davious White's gone. Like, they cut everybody. I don't know who's going to play defense for these guys next year. They're going to be in some serious trouble. We'll see what they do. But they're out of space. They restructured Von Miller. They're doing all kinds of things. It's absolutely wild. We're going to talk a little bit about that. The rest of the AFC, Chris Jones had a cryptic tweet as we work our way through the news. If you didn't see this, if you remember after the Super Bowl, there was this great shot of Andy Reid coming up to Chris Jones, who was lying on his back. And I think Andy he was coming up to give him a little rib, but I think Andy kind of tripped. His feet hit Chris's feet, and Andy kind of lost his balance. He ended up falling directly on top of Chris Jones. And, they were celebrating the Super Bowl, and it's this great picture. Well, Chris Jones tweeted that out. And we'll get a little bit more of the specifics, but he tweeted out KC with like an ellipsis. And I mean, everybody thinks that what that means is Chris Jones the deal is pretty much done. They've worked out an extension. And what's interesting is he took a screenshot of this image from his phone, and up at the top, where you can see right up here in this part right up here, where they call it, if you don't have one of the newer iPhones, it's called like the island, the floating island. If you've got a timer or something, or you've been on the phone for a certain amount of time, it'll show up in that little black part right there. He was on the phone and was on the phone for an hour. So like it said 1 hour. So What? Like, who was he talking to? What was going on? Like, who's on a phone conversation for an hour and then decides to tweet out something cryptic like that? Well, maybe it was a phone call about his contract with Brett Veach and his agents, Katz Brothers. We'll see. We don't know. There's lots of speculation. It's fun. It's that time of year. But no official news yet. There's also a report from Diana Rossini, who was on the Athletic podcast, who said she heard that the Chiefs think they can fetch a first-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed. So I'm interested to hear Price's opinion on that as well. We've all been sort of like, at least on this podcast, if the Chiefs could get a second-round pick for L'Jarius Sneed, that would be good. That would be fantastic. We would all be thrilled with that. Maybe a second-rounder and a late-round pick. Fantastic. So if they actually could get a first-round pick for this guy who's like 28 years old, sign me up. We'll talk about that. And then just one quick news note. Jalen Watson tweeted he just had a successful surgery to repair his torn labrum, which he tore in week 2. So if you haven't been caught up on the news, dude toughed it out all season long. If you didn't already like Jalen, you should really like him now. He showed an absolutely insane degree of toughness. He had the opportunity to have that surgery done. Instead, he opted to play through the pain and help his team throughout the course of the year. Now he's got 2 Super Bowl rings. So probably worth it. But man, you know what I mean? Like, I stubbed my toe and I'm out of commission. I'm whining like a baby. I'm certainly not going to go out and play football. So I can't imagine doing it with a torn muscle. It's just absolutely insane. We're going to get the Price. We're going to talk free agency and we're going to talk the draft. But before we do, if you're watching on YouTube, do me a favor. Make sure you hit that like button. It's a great way to support the show. And if you're not subscribed to the Arrowhead Addict podcast, we've got shows all week long, every week throughout the offseason. Shows on game days, pregame shows, halftime shows, postgame shows, emergency podcasts. It's a great, great product, we like to think. And if you want to get your Chiefs news from us and get that opinion and analysis, make sure you are subscribed and you have the notifications turned on, because this time of year, when that Chris Jones deal breaks, if we can, we're going to hop on here and go live and we're going to talk about it. So you don't want to miss anything. All right, before we get to Price, I got to let you know that if you haven't downloaded the BetMGM app yet, you will definitely want to take advantage of this limited time offer. New users who sign up through our link must deposit $10, place a first wager of $5 on any live bet, and once your bet is placed, you will instantly receive $150 in bonus bets. I mean, that's incredible. You'll get 3 bonus bet tokens of $50, allowing you to make multiple wagers with your bonuses. This is an offer that's only available through our link, bit.ly/ArrowGM. You can find that link in the description below our stream, or you can scan the QR code and start signing up. Again, the link is bit.ly/ARROWMGM. This offer is only available for new customers who are 21 and physically present, 21 or older, and physically present in a legal gambling state. Please remember to always gamble responsibly. Check out the episode description for the full terms of the offer to see if you qualify. It's a great way to support the show. We get a lot of good sports coming up. Baseball's coming back. The NBA is getting into the home stretch. NHL will be coming around the corner. College football, like, you got to be ready if you want to have a little bit of fun, get a little action, and of course, March Madness. All right, let's get Price in here. I'm tired of going solo. Price, what's up, my man? How you doing?
I'm doing really well. How are you today?
I'm all right, man. I think I might have a little bit of a cold coming on. I'm trying to manifest that it's just like allergies or something, and it never fully develops. But I woke up with a little bit of a sore throat, but then it went away. But then I felt a little wonky during the day. I'm not sure, man. I'm on the edge of my seat, much like the Chris Jones contract situation.
Yeah, I used to have a football coach that like swore that sickness was a mentality, that like the minute you start going, "Oh, I'm getting sick,"
yeah,
that's when you get sick. Just like flush it with water and rest. That's really the only thing you can do. It's kind of like feels like the first rainy day of spring here. It's definitely a little cooler, but yeah, I'm doing really well. I'm excited. We're in full swing of rumor season and fake Adam Schefter accounts. It's here, baby. So yeah. Buckle in.
Yeah, and you've got a little baby at home, am I right?
That is right. She is a champion sleeper. She's great. She woke up at 3:30 this morning. We fed her, put her back to bed, and I just never went back to sleep. So I got up around 4 a.m. and started working this morning. Honestly, when you got a 3-year-old and a newborn at the house, you get the house quiet for a couple hours. Can't waste that opportunity. So she's doing great though, and we're doing really well. I'm about to take the rest of my paternity leave here, so I won't be back at work for quite some time.
Yeah. How old is she now?
5 weeks today. 5 weeks today. Yeah.
Unbelievable,
Crazy.
man.
Yeah, we're going really fast.
Congratulations to you and the missus. I myself and my wife are expecting, and she's just turning the corner here into the 3rd trimester. So he's going to arrive at the end of May. And so I'm sort of like, now I'm entering that stage where it's like, all right, man, like time to get your shit together. Like I'm starting to put the nursery, like we're doing home repairs, because anything that I'm going to want to do that I know I'm not going to have the energy or time to do once he arrives, I'm trying to get taken care of. But I'm definitely entering that phase where I'm like, oh shit, like this is going to happen. Like, we're in the home stretch here. It's exhilarating and terrifying at the same time.
Yeah, there's no getting ready for it. Just be ready to start tying some shoes. If she's in the 3rd trimester, that's an activity that she won't be doing much longer. So start tying some shoes and helping out. But yeah, it like I said, you're never ready for it. The good news is no one ever is. When they get here, you're growing with the baby. You'll get better at it. This is our 2nd, and I feel like a seasoned veteran, man. Like I just knew what to expect. So much easier a 2nd time, which is good because I was kind of nervous with having a 3-year-old around. But it's been great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've already got some Chiefs stuff for him. I'm gonna raise him right. I might need to get something. I need like a Chiefs swaddle so that just like as soon as he's like out into the world, we can just wrap him up in a Mahomes jersey or something. Will be good to go. He'll know right from the jump what's what. My wife, she grew up in Chicago. She's a native Chicagoan, and every once in a while she's like, well, what if he could be a Bears fan? And I'm like, child services will take him away from us.
Don't wish that sort of negative energy on a child. Yeah. They deserve better than that.
Yeah. And she knows better. I mean, she knows there's no chance the kid is. She's like angling for Cubs and stuff. Like we'll talk about it, but like, yeah, Bears. No, it's not the right thing to do. But let's get into some Chiefs talk, man. So maybe we should start a baby podcast on the side. We'll have to talk about that later. But okay, so. You heard everything. You were here. You were in the waiting room. You heard everything I was talking about at the top of the show. What do you think about this Chris Jones thing? Am I crazy because I'm a big believer. We were talking about in the Arrowhead Addict chat, and like Connor thinks he's like, it's all, it's just like last summer, and Carrington Harrison, he was tweeting about that, and I'm on team like it's a done deal. He's going to get signed. Am I crazy? What's your take on all this?
It's really tough because if you look at it at the 10,000-foot view, I feel like there's virtually no reason for Chris Jones to sign in Kansas City. Most players look at getting to free agency as a privilege, as an honor in some ways, to be out on the open market and see what people gift for their services. However, we just saw another player who isn't quite as good as Chris Jones, but is still a very good player in Mike Evans, basically waive his right to go to the free market and re-sign with his team. That sounded like, something that maybe he just personally decided. The salary cap going up, Chris Jones had to be excited about that. A lot of teams got a lot of money to pay the best player on the free agent market by everyone's account. With all of that being said, you have to also kind of read into what all the messaging is. Every person who's in on the know, who reports on these type of things, seems to think that the Chiefs are very optimistic that they can get a deal done. I'm not necessarily sure what's changed from this year to last year to where, it was a glorified pissing match last year to now it is much more positive. I'm not sure what's changed, except he's another year older and, the Chiefs no longer have him under control. So I'm inclined, I guess, just because I want to believe the reporting that a deal gets done here before the deadline. But, if they do reach it till Monday and he doesn't sign, he's going to take some time. It doesn't rule out a return, but it's just hard to believe that with all the money that's out there on the market, that some team's not going to get desperate and pay him a whole lot of money.
He probably could get a bigger deal than what the Chiefs are willing to pay. That I agree with. I think there's a few things at play here. And the reason why I'm optimistic, and by the way, I saw Phantom asked it, am I turning my podcast into a nursery? No, sir. This is on the first floor. We've got a guest bedroom upstairs. We're going to turn that one into the nursery right next to our bedroom. So here's what I think. The difference between this year and last year for me is that last year the Chiefs had all the leverage. There wasn't really anything that Chris Jones could do other than withhold his services as long as he was comfortable with. That was one game. He lost that money, and then he had a chance to earn it back with incentives. And he got it. He got most of that, if not all that money back, because they won the Super Bowl. So there was no reason for the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs, when they tagged him, they were comfortable. They tagged him because they didn't want to let him go, and they didn't want to let him go for nothing. And I think they were comfortable with, look, we'd like to have the cap flexibility, I'm sure, but if he has to play under the tag, we have our number and we're not going to go over our number, and we have the leverage. They knew that no matter what, Chris Jones was going to play for them next year. There was no chance he was going to sit out for a significant amount of time, and that's exactly what happened. And the Chiefs were comfortable spending that money, and you really can't blame them. It worked out. They won the Super Bowl. This year is different. This year, as you pointed out, Chris Jones has all the leverage. The Chiefs are not willing to tag him. They tagged L'Jarius Sneed. And as a side thing, I think they're comfortable with Sneed playing under that tag if it goes that way, if they're not able to trade him. I don't think, because, if once you tag a guy like that, if he signs it, if you can't move him, he's locked in. So you have to be comfortable with it. Chris Jones' tag number was way too high this year. They weren't going to tag him. But I think they know that he wants to be back. And at this point, they probably know what their number is, and they're going to make that offer. And it really comes down to that point to Chris. He can go out and probably get more money on the open market. How much more is it? That we don't know, because we don't know what the Chiefs are offering. Is it a couple more $1 million per year? It's nothing to sneeze at. It's nothing to turn your nose up at. But Chris Jones is already a very wealthy man. He was paid handsomely last year for a 1 year of work. He didn't get hurt. He played really well. I just think that he's looking at the situation and why do you want to leave at that point? Is it to get that one last big payday? Okay, great. If you do, if that's what your goal is, fantastic. And nobody could blame him, because his legacy is certainly cemented. He's a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He has nothing to prove. So go get paid. And I think that's what L'Jarius Sneed wants to do, right? Like L'Jarius Sneed's like, God, I got my legacy. I'm 28. I want to get as much money as possible. But Jones has money. There's something to be said about comfort, about wanting to be a legend at the place where you've played your whole career, and the opportunity to do something unbelievably special, which is be the first NFL team in history to three-peat. And what did Chris Jones say right after the Super Bowl? I said to Clark, you got to get me back. We got to get this three-peat. What did he say at the parade? I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be here for the next 3 years, is basically what he said. Now, some people will say that doesn't mean anything. Throw that out. It was the Bud Light talking. It was the euphoria talking, all that stuff. I'm going to take the man at his word. I think Chris Jones is a little bit of a different cat. He's a really interesting personality. He's popped on the podcast before on a whim when he had COVID. So I just think that he wants to be in Kansas City. And I think if they get close enough, he's going to come back. And I think he said the things that he said because he knows they're going to be able to get close enough. So I do think it's a little bit different than last year. And I think he's going to come back.
Yeah. And I think there's two ways you can look at it. Everything you said there is very true. And I do think it's noteworthy that the Chiefs are trying, much different player as far as his legacy with the Chiefs, but a very vocal, outstanding leader of the team at one point was Tyrann Mathieu on the defense. And there was a time that Tyrann Mathieu sat down with the writer at the Star, and basically after he had signed his deal in New Orleans, he said, I would have taken the contract that they gave Justin Reed. I wasn't ever offered it. They didn't even come to the table for Tyrann Mathieu.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're being very open and vocal about, hey, we want to retain Chris Jones. He's our priority. And I think the franchise tag for L'Jarius Sneed also shows some of that as well. I think all those things make a lot of sense and certainly add to it. I also think that everything is done for a reason. The Chiefs are very purposeful about how they do this, right? We heard about Patrick Mahomes going and throwing with Quentin Johnston and Zay Flowers. We never heard a peep about Rashee Rice, and then guess who's in Kansas City? Maybe the Chiefs are being very public about this 27, 29 number because, frankly, that seems low for Chris Jones's market by almost all estimates. Maybe that's Christian Wilkins' money. Maybe that's like, hey, we've set aside this money. Chris Jones, we're willing to meet you this far. But if you're not going to take it, we're just going to go and give it to a player who's younger, a different style player, certainly not as quality of a player, but that's something that's possible too. I think we all would prefer Chris Jones here, especially just for the legacy element of it. And I do think he impacts the game in a more dynamic way than Wilkins, but Wilkins is a very good player too. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, nobody ever wanted to see Jordan in a Wizards uniform, but it didn't impact the legacy of Michael Jordan any. It just kind of is weird when you see those pictures. And I would feel the same way if we saw Chris Jones in like a Jets uniform or a Falcons uniform or something, like for 2 years.
Gross.
Yeah, it's just disgusting. And like, why not just stay where you are and take a very handsome payday, and they can throw some incentives in there for, I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. But I was encouraged by that tweet. I don't think it's BS. I've been encouraged by what he said. And I think he wants to be back, and I think he's going to make that happen. But we'll see. Everybody's different, man.
Patrick Mahomes retweeted it too. So
right.
Like the hype machine only continues. So
yeah, I'll never begrudge a player getting every last dollar he can. I think that makes sense. But Chris Jones belongs in Kansas City. There's just certain guys, man. You know what I mean? Like you don't ever want to see Patrick Mahomes in another uniform. You don't ever want to see Travis Kelce in another uniform, and you don't ever want to see Chris Jones, all-time player. So hopefully they'll get the deal done. But let's turn our attention to L'Jarius Sneed. What do you think of this? What do you think of this report that the Chiefs think that they can get a first-round pick? Like the thing is, and we all know this is the silly season, right? This is when like all kinds of weird stuff gets leaked to the media for all kinds of different ulterior motives. Is that just the Chiefs saying like, yeah, we think we can get a first-round pick for him, trying to drive up the price? The rest of the league hears that, and maybe they come in with that kind of offer?
Well, I did listen to the Rossini report that you were referring to as well. And I think like she brought up some really good points. She's been very on the beat for the L'Jarius Sneed story. I would assume that that's probably a team source that's helping her out a little bit, or the agents perhaps. But I think that there's a lot of good factors here that could, encourage the Chiefs to think that they might get a first round pick. First off, you got several teams competing for a player. It's been reported that there's as much as 6 or 7 teams that are in on him. Also of note, in the last hour or so, the Chicago Bears extended Jalen Johnson, who was maybe the only corner who he wasn't going to hit the market, but the only corner that's even comparable to L'Jarius Sneed as a player. And his contract is now set, which is another, like a lot of players, they use other players' contracts to negotiate off of. So that's part of this as well, is that L'Jarius Sneed gets a role in this and deciding where he's going because of the contract. He's going to get traded to a place he wanted to, much like Tyreek got to kind of negotiate with Miami. With all that being said, if they can get it, you certainly take it. That's an excellent haul. I would be surprised. Some people have pointed out the fact that basically Jalen Ramsey and Prime Darrelle Revis are the only people who've been traded for more than a third-round pick as corners. The Darius Slay trade is a little bit more representative of where L'Jarius Sneed might be. It's interesting because I do think L'Jarius Sneed, especially this last season he's had, is probably better than that, season that Darius Slay was traded, or some of those other players. So maybe second round is truly the best fit for him. I do think that they can get creative here as well. They can do something like L'Jarius Sneed plus pick 32 to get up to, the Arizona Cardinals pick. They're a team that would make some sense. I've not heard them rumored, but they have a tons of picks, tons of cap space, and virtually nobody on defense worth building around. So Sneed could be that type of player. So that's an option as well. And that basically equates out to a mid third round pick as far as like the Jimmy Johnson trade chart goes. So that's possible as well. I assume that the Chiefs are floating that first round pick saying, hey fellas, like, come on, we're going to have to step it up a bit. It's also worth noting that Rossini reported that the Chiefs, the market for this is not going to be instantaneous. Like, I know a lot of us are expecting like, boom, the clock strikes midnight, free agency is here, where's L'Jarius Sneed going? She said this might be a little bit slower developing because other teams are going to see what they can get in free agency first. Maybe they're okay with getting the third or fourth guy on their board, but Sneed is the youngest corner and the best corner on the market, and that's worth something. So teams will probably pay for that.
I think that's a really interesting thing that you pointed out, which is that it doesn't just have to be for a pick. They can try to use him as an asset and other assets they have and move up to maybe get a guy that, maybe here's the thing. I've heard, and we're going to get to the draft talk in a minute, so we don't have to dive too deeply into this, but I've heard that some people think as many as 6 quarterbacks could go in the first round. every time, one thing I love about having Patrick Mahomes, aside from the fact that he's the best quarterback ever, is that every time the draft comes along, we don't have, that's one position we don't have to worry about. And every other team that does have to draft a quarterback in the first round, and they often reach for them because of the, how important the position is, it pushes talent back towards the Chiefs at every other position. So I'm always looking for a draft with a lot of quarterbacks. Do you think that many could go in the first round?
I would be surprised by 6. Last I saw, there is a chance for 5, though. I certainly would like, if I'm a betting man, you set the line at 4.5. I'm probably taking the under. I think, the holy trinity there, that is Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. That's kind of been the thing for quite some time. And then JJ McCarthy has surely inserted himself into the conversation here. I know that there's a lot of consternation about what type of player he is as far as what he did for the Michigan offense and what he was asked to do. But at the end of the day, he played in a pro-style offense. He's a 5-star recruit who's lost 1 game in his high school and college career. That's worth something. And he throws over the middle of the field well. I know that there were some clips of him throwing left and drills. Some of that's due to the wide receivers he's playing with as well. Ultimately, teams are going to be in on that. And then the player that's kind of risen from the combine was Michael Penix from Washington. Everyone is familiar with him from the college football playoff. He's a guy that a lot of people really like, electric player, throws a beautiful ball, a lefty, but the medicals were the big part for him. He interviewed really well. Everyone knew he would. He throws the ball beautifully, but he's a player who's had 2 season-ending knee injuries, and the medicals, from what reports sound like, they came back positive. So I think a team will probably talk themselves into Penix because he's actually a little bit more of a more traditional pocket passer than most quarterbacks that come out of the draft. I would be surprised after that. Bo Nix didn't have a great Senior Bowl. I wasn't overwhelmed by anything I'd heard about him at the combine. Also, he's pretty old for a quarterback prospect. He has more college football starts than any player, and the offense he was playing in was pretty manufactured in the throws that he was making. Now, he was one of the best quarterbacks in college football this year, but I think that some team might wait for the Drew Lock type of pick for him. So, but definitely 4. And I mean, you feel really good about that.
Yeah, if that's four positions, they'll be in front of the Chiefs. I'm all for it, man. Take all those quarterbacks. Take Bo Nix. Take them all. Reach away, everybody. It's the way I feel about it. All right, so I'm with you. I don't think that there's a chance that Snead goes for a first round pick. I just don't buy it. I don't see it happening. If he was 24 or something and hitting the market, maybe that would change the cap. But at 28 on a position that so relies on athleticism, trying to keep up with all these crazy receivers, do you get 2 more prime years out of him? He's had some knee injuries and some things like that. There's some more, but a second I would be happy with. I think the thing to remember is if the Chiefs just let him walk, which is off the table now, but if they had just let him walk in free agency, they're probably getting a 3rd round compensatory pick for him based on the deal that he would have gotten on the open market. So they must believe that they can at least get more than that. So if it gives them ammo, even if it's a higher 3rd round pick, and then they're able to package that to move up in the 2nd round to get a guy that they want, or package it to move up in the 1st round, which we know they'll probably try. I wouldn't be surprised if they try to move up in the 1st round. Like last year, they're going to need somebody to actually want to deal with them, and they couldn't find that last year. They're in a really good spot with him because he is a super valuable asset. He's not going to be crazy expensive for a team, not in the way that if they tag Chris Jones, you're not trading that $30 million 1-year deal to anybody. So I'm fascinated to see how it all plays out with Snead. And I think you're right. I think it's going to take a little bit of time, get a little bit closer to the draft, and then somebody's probably going to pounce on him. So it's it's my favorite time of year. I love it. All right, let's and as you mentioned, Jalen Johnson, he gets about 19 a year, 54 million guaranteed. So that kind of sets the mark. Do you see Snead going for more than that, or a little bit less?
I'm going to be honest. I'm not super familiar with Jalen Johnson's game as far as age goes, and I do know that Johnson is an All-Pro. He was named to the All-Pro team this year. That's worth noting. I know, as Chiefs fans, we love to say that L'Jarius Snead should have been an All-Pro. He probably should have been. But if you're the team that's acquiring a player, that matters a little bit. If you're a GM, you want that pelt up on your wall that, hey, I traded for an all-pro corner. And the fact that L'Jarius Sneed wasn't, that matters a little bit. I assume that he will come pretty close to the Jalen Johnson deal. Either, +1, like they kind of like to do with contracts where it's like, 19.2 million or, average annual value. But I suspect it will probably be close in that range. The only thing that's like the true wild card here is the medicals. Nothing pushes teams away further than that. And usually trades are always pending a physical. And, we think that obviously the knee was pretty good, looked pretty good last time we saw it in the Super Bowl, but you just want to be for sure on those type of things. But yeah, I would think that would be very close and very kind of lay out the blueprint for it.
I saw some people talking about Johnson and basically said that what they were saying was he's really good at cover corner, but like he doesn't do everything well in the way that L'Jarius needs a really good tackler. He's just such a good all-around player. He can blitz. So that maybe puts him up a little bit. But then you have to factor in things like age and health, as you mentioned. I see someone in the chat. And we're going to, before we get into the draft stuff, I wanted to touch on a couple free agency things. And one of the folks in the chat, Conway Liddy, said Sneed for Pittman. And Price, you and I were talking about this yesterday, I think, about how much we like Pittman for the Chiefs offense. I talked to Michael Pittman at the Super Bowl. Also seems just like a super, super interesting guy, owns a farm. But you and I kind of came to the conclusion that we just don't think that you want to, they got a young quarterback there at Anthony Richardson. Why would you trade your number one offensive option and security blanket for a cornerback when you're trying to develop your young quarterbacks? Do you see any world where Sneed for Pittman happens?
I certainly don't think like heads up like that. Like I think there probably have to be an exchange of picks. Pittman is a little bit younger. He's just a year younger than Sneed. Obviously, Sneed was a better corner than Pittman was wide receiver this year. But also wide receivers get paid more than corners typically. So there's some balancing out to do there. And we're not just substantiating rumors. This is something that Nate Taylor reported, that there's been some conversations of a tag for a tag. That doesn't necessarily mean like when we're talking about these conversations, right? It could literally just be like Chris Ballard, former Chiefs guy, Brett Veach calls him up and say, hey, what about a tag for tag? And he says, get lost, buddy. And they hang up the phone. Like that could have been the conversation, but there was a conversation that was had. And obviously Nate Taylor's very credible. So see that making a lot of sense. I know Anthony Richardson's kind of not a traditional passer and doesn't have a ton of passing experience, but you don't want to trade away a player like that. This is the phase that they need to be building, not trading away assets. And Chris Ballard has gotten a reputation of being a little bit of a stingy GM. He always rolls over cap space. They're never a team that is all in. So it would be really surprising, but I mean, if they're willing to do it, I think that makes a ton of sense. That solves so many problems for the Chiefs because Michael Pittman's more of a traditional outside receiver. Rashee Rice has the freedom to run in the slot or out wide, and you have that kind of like nice floor to the receiver room. Then you feel good about taking maybe someone with more upside in the draft instead of having to hit on some guy in day one.
Yeah, I agree, man. I think Pittman's like he's the perfect fit for this offense. He's such a consistent receiver, great hands, knows how to get separation, gets open. I just think he would be I think he'd be an absolute monster in this offense and would make things easier on Rashee Rice, make things easier on Travis Kelce. I don't know that it's going to happen, but I do think depending on, exactly how you factor in maybe some other assets, it could be a win-win for both teams. All right. Here's another wacky one that has been thrown around on Twitter as far as free agency. Chiefs don't really have any running backs outside of Isaiah Pacheco. We haven't seen any of the other guys really do anything in real football action in the regular season. Jerick McKinnon had injury issues his entire career. Last year was pretty much a non-factor for the Chiefs. But the Chiefs used him to great effect 2 years ago to win a Super Bowl, especially as a receiving back. We saw some more receiving from Pacheco, but it didn't seem like he was on McKinnon's level. So people keep throwing around the name Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler, I believe, is going to be 29 rather soon. He didn't look great in Los Angeles last year, but I'll be honest with you, he was out for injury. They put Joshua Kelly in. He didn't look great. No running back looked good in Los Angeles last year. So do you think do you think Eckler's washed, or was that just a bad running game last year? And two, would he be a fit in Kansas City?
Well, I certainly think bringing in Austin Eckler, the role would have to be a lot different than what he's been in LA. He's been a true bell cow for quite some time. Over the last couple of years, he's scored more touchdowns than almost any other player in the NFL. He is someone that I could certainly see having some success in a Jerick McKinnon-like role, where we're talking maybe 5 to 7 carries a game, passing downs only, check down Charlie, that type of player. And frankly, I think he'd be great at it. I think that would be a great role for him. He's a really great player. Like, he really embraces the fantasy community, which is very cool to see from players who mostly hate the fantasy community. But I think it's a great fit. I think it makes some sense, but he's old. And, I saw a video of someone syncing up Chop Robinson, who's an edge from Penn State that ran the 40-yard dash very quickly for an edge player, syncing up with a play where Austin Eckler broke loose against the Packers, and it's like the same speed. So, because it was like one of those plays that Austin Eckler, he should have totally, scored on this play, but he didn't. So, but I do think that role is something that the Chiefs really need. This offense looked the best it has looked in quite some time when Jerick McKinnon was towards the back end of 2022 and really a player in the passing game. And Damian Williams really opened that part of the offense up back when he was here. So some other names that might make sense is Antonio Gibson. He's got some familiarity with the offense from Eric Bieniemy, who was coaching him with the Commanders. A little bit bigger fish would be like Tony Pollard. He's a great second back. He's definitely not a lead back, but these are guys that right now, like with Jerick McKinnon in the backfield, no team fears him carrying the ball. Like, if they're handing the ball off to him, that's not putting any fear in them. Tony Pollard or someone like that, if they can carry the ball, they can at least be a viable threat in the run game. And same with Austin Eckler.
I always think back to when the Chiefs had Kareem Hunt and they would use him in the passing game. The offense was just so dynamic. You saw flashes of that with McKinnon. I'm for anybody. I think Antonio Gibson's a really good call out. I think he's really talented and has been a little bit misused in Washington. I would love to see a guy like that get in Andy Reid's offense. I think if the Chiefs can add that reliable out of the backfield threat so that they're not having to have Pacheco out there all 3 downs because he runs so hard. I mean, just needing somebody else reliable to mix it up, who's got good hands. With the way that teams play the Chiefs, you're going to have space. Like, you're going to have space to get the ball out there if you can do something with it. That's, I think, a fascinating one as we head into free agency. So what are some other, before we get to the draft, like, what are some other positions that you think the Chiefs will target before the draft? Positions of need that maybe when, the conversation we're going to have in a minute about offensive skill positions, or all the positions on offense that we think the Chiefs might target in the draft, that by the time we get to the end of April, we're good there. They can go elsewhere.
I think that they will stay away from tackle here in this first wave. I suspect that they will probably do something similar to last year if they don't come away with a tackle prospect that they feel comfortable with after the draft, whether that be like a Tyron Smith or, Donovan Smith or someone like that. Like, I don't really like this name, but like an Andre Dillard or something, if he's available, another stopgap. I think one spot that definitely will need some attention is nose tackle, not necessarily defensive tackle, whether Chris Jones is here or not. Derek Nottie has declined over the past couple of years. He's a great Chief, has had some big plays in this team that will never get the recognition that they deserve. But there's some names out there that are, one techs that can line up over the center. Obviously, Mike Pennell was a beast for this team during the Super Bowl. They probably don't win that game without his dynamic play, but he's not a guy who's going to be up in St. Joe. He's a guy who might not even be playing before Thanksgiving or Christmas at this point. And if they want to bring him back, I'm all in favor. There's some names like DJ Reader out there who fill that kind of role. Grover Stewart's name I've mentioned from the Indianapolis Colts. These are guys who are just run stoppers, but that's something that the Chiefs defense has been vulnerable to at times. I also think edge is another position. I think the injury to Charles Omenihu is probably the urgency there. He's probably not going to be lining up anytime soon for the Chiefs with that torn ACL. I think that they like Felix Anudike-Uzomah. I know they had this redshirt year, losing Mike Dana and Omenihu. I think they need another body there. Like an AJ Epinesa is a name that makes a lot of sense. He's long, he's lean, he's kind of spagsy. Also, like Emmanuel Ogba's back on the market. He's been a Chief before. These aren't names that I really love, but I do think that they just need to add some quality depth to there. And maybe that's just bringing back Mike Dana. I've not heard anything like that. I think Mike Dana might surprise some people by how much he makes. And then there's it's a pretty good like class too. They could also make a bigger move there. Jonathan Grenard from the Texans, he had a really good season. He's a player that I can see them making a move. Bryce Huff isn't really their type of player. He's from the Jets. He's more quick, bendy, twitchy rather than power like Spags likes. But those are names as well too. So I think that there's a lot of names out there. I definitely think that there needs to be some improvement there. I don't know that they'll make any move in the secondary. I think that they like that. Although I will say there's a ton of safeties on the market. Wouldn't surprise me if they go find another Mike Edwards just to make that dime look more effective, or just bring back Mike Edwards, because I think that market's going to be pretty suppressed.
I thought Mike Edwards was a really nice pickup for them. You mentioned nose tackle at the beginning. How valuable do you think it would be for the Chiefs to have a somewhat of a dominant nose tackle lining up over center next to Chris Jones? How big of an impact could that have on the Chiefs defense if they were to get somebody really good?
I think that defenses more and more are relying on those type of players. Like Vita V is one of those few players that like they can play 4 down linemen and still be able to play dime behind them and still have solid run defense. That's super valuable. That's something that the Chiefs have never really had. To that point, they don't always play that way. They have found a way to be pretty sound in the run. Part of that is they ask their corners to tackle a lot more than other teams do.
Yeah.
But it would be a great option to have, especially because like Chris Jones is about 50-50 of where his sacks come from, on the inside or the outside. That also allows the Chiefs to do more stunting and blitzing like they want to do. So I think that there's definitely value to it, but we see nose tackles fall in the draft all the time. Like a lot of people like Tavondre Sweat out of Texas, big guy, super fun and animated, scored a touchdown in the Big 12 championship last year, but he's not someone that is going to go in the second round probably, just because he's probably a 10 to 15 snap player a game, and Jordan Davis got a ton of hype in the draft a couple of years ago because of his insane combine performance, and he was a national champion for Georgia. He plays 15 snaps a game. That's valuable, but how valuable?
Yeah. I see somebody in the chat saying the Chiefs should just release Omenihu and bring back Mike Dana. Question about, do you think, because the Chiefs can save money by releasing Charles Omenihu, my contention on this one is if they can get away with it, I'd love for him to rehab and come back for the stretch run in the playoffs, because he made such an impact late in the season for them this year. But then, you got to get to the playoffs and you got to get there. What's your take on him? Should they cut him and take the money, or should they keep him on board and rehab him?
Yeah, man, that's really tough. I know our friend Matt Verderam has also alluded to that it makes a lot of sense to do that cap-wise. They could also extend him and push that money out if they wanted to kind of basically keep him around long-term. The Chiefs have this luxury where if there's something we learned from this season, it's that like no game really matters until the playoffs, right? They just got to kind of get through it and get in the playoffs, and then that all bets are off. So I would like to see them keep him in town, especially because I always thought part of the plan for Charles Omenihu coming into town was to soften the impact of a potential Chris Jones loss, because before he came to the Chiefs, he played and was more successful in the interior of the defensive line. So I could really see him making more of an impact rushing from the inside when he comes back. With that being said, though, you never know what a player is going to be like coming back from an ACL. Some players just rehab differently, and there is some risk there. And I'm not sure if there's some sort of injury settlement or what type of money he's guaranteed if they were to move on for him. But it's a brutal business, and it's totally possible that that's what they end up doing.
Yeah, it certainly is. Chiefs got to do what's best for the Chiefs, and if they think somebody can help them more, they're going to make the move. But I liked what we saw from him. If they think he can get back to the way he was playing last year, as you pointed out, man, like the Chiefs, they're going to be there at the end of the year unless something catastrophic happens. They're going to be there. They're going to be in the playoffs, and it's nice to get a pass rusher all of a sudden calling him out of the bullpen late in the season with fresh legs, who's just been rehabbing. But we'll see. Brett Veach and the Chiefs medical staff know a heck of a lot more about what's going on with him than I do. All right, let's get into this. So I wanted to go over some of the potential targets in your view for the Chiefs on the offensive side of the ball. And let's start with the offensive line, because we don't know what's going to happen at the left tackle position. We don't know exactly how the Chiefs view Wanya Morris. I think they like him. I think they did think he did some nice things last year, but there's a reason why he was a 3rd-round pick. Do you want to go into the season with him tapped as your starting left tackle with very limited action? I'm not so sure. Who are the guys, like the top 3 guys on the offensive tackle side, that you think the Chiefs might target?
Yeah, like you said, we're going to be focusing on players that are attainable. Like, I would love to, I'm not sure if I'd like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari or a Bugatti. Good news is that's not the market I'm in. So like Joe Alt, obviously he's the cream of the crop at the offensive class, but unfortunately the Chiefs are going to need a dramatic trade up for that to happen. So we're going to kind of target the players that I think are close to the realm of 32 or, a potential trade up for the Chiefs. My first guy that I have ranked is Tyler Guyton out of Oklahoma. It's a little unusual because he's only played 1 season at right tackle. Actually, he's the guy who basically replaced Wanya Morris, but he has the athletic profile to move over to the left side. Obviously, the Chiefs have an affinity for Oklahoma offensive linemen, as they had Orlando Brown in here. They drafted Wanya Morris and Creed Humphrey as well. He's 6'7", 322 pounds with a 34-inch arm length. That's all Chiefs measurables. You'll hear me hit that a lot. The Chiefs don't draft tackles with short arms. That's just not something they do. Wanya Morris was the first guy to have tackle length arms after the 1st round in last year's draft. They just don't do it. He tested really well though. He was a 97% athlete as far as testing goes, as far as tackle testing all time. He's athletic, explosive. He's got really heavy hands. He's smart. That's one thing that I really liked about him, is that he seems to be able to identify where rushers are coming from. There's no kind of oops, you got me moments on tape with him. And obviously, because of the Oklahoma offense and kind of the way that they play, he's more of a pass blocking guy than he is a run blocking guy. He doesn't have that kind of mean streak run blocking, but he's a guy that I do think absolutely could move over to left side. And obviously there's some comfort there with Morris and Guyton. Maybe they, battle it out for left tackle in camp. I definitely think that he has all the traits and has the tape that could certainly move over to the left side. My next guy is Kingsley Suamatia from BYU. He is the cousin of Penei Sewell. He trains with him. He's the Lions right tackle. He is a little bit shorter for a tackle, not super short. He's 6'4", 326 pounds. Again, he's got those long arms that you like, 34-inch arms. Another strong tester, 93% athlete. He has over 600 snaps at left tackle and 600 snaps at right tackle. The good news with him is he's from BYU, but he's not an older prospect. A lot of those BYU guys, sometimes they're older. He's still 21 years old, so that's a good sign. Chiefs typically don't like to draft players that are kind of in that 23, 24 range. I will say with him, again, another athletic guy. He has kind of that mean streak. The BYU offense is kind of interesting. They run a ton of RPOs. There were some questions as to how sustainable that would be in the NFL as far as tackle plays go. But last year, Blake Freeland was a tackle drafted out of BYU by the Colts, and he actually had a really strong season. So I think that's part of the reason why some people are a little bit more optimistic about Suamatia as far as where he could go. A lot of times you see him in that end of the 1st, early 2nd round area. My last guy, and this is a guy that I've kind of been on for quite some time. Frankly, sometimes I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with him, because I feel like, is everyone seeing what I'm seeing? I just don't get it. The consensus seems lower on Patrick Paul out of Houston than I am. He is 6'7", 331 pounds with 36-inch arms. I mean, this dude is just a giant. He has a Giannis wingspan, right, as far as length goes. Even at that size, he ran a 5.13 40-yard dash. He did 30 reps on the bench press, so there's plenty of strength there. He struggled a little bit at the Senior Bowl with some pass rush, or with some real strong bull rush. But with that being said, he's a 5-year player, 3-year starter at left tackle, and he's been a team captain for 2 years. Dane Brugler reported on the Prospect of Pros podcast that he was a really strong interviewer. By the way, he interviewed with the Chiefs. I wrote about that as well. Really interesting guy. He wants to get into politics after he retires from football. His dad is in politics in Nigeria. He's a first-generation Nigerian American as well. And his brother was also drafted by the Tennessee Titans. So all those guys, if you squint your eyes a little bit and imagine just a little bit more athleticism, you see shades of Orlando Brown. Those are generally the type of tackles that Andy Reid has liked in his time there. With the exception of Mitch Schwartz, who just was an exceptional player coming from Cleveland, those are the type of guys they like to draft. All those guys, to me, then there's a big drop off as far as tackle goes. Then you start getting into those second range, and there's some interesting names as prospects like Dominic Pooney out of Kansas. I like a little bit. I also thought it was noteworthy at the combine. I didn't include him here because I think he's just going to go too high as Troy Fountainu from Washington. He was a guy that a lot of people had kicked inside just because of his body type, but he actually came in with much longer arms than expected and looked super fluid in pass protection, tested really well. I think he's going to be gone, but he's probably one of the top 3 or 4 offensive linemen in the class. But there's a ton of talent here, and I really like how it sets up for the Chiefs.
How many offensive tackles, say, do you think will go in the first round?
I tweeted this out after the combine. I think there's a real chance that there's 15 wide receiver offensive tackle combo taken in the first round. I know that sounds insane, but seriously, it's possible because I think that there's 6 or 7 offensive tackles that are going to be taken, which historically, if you're the team taking the offensive tackle 6, it's not worked out well. But this class is just so strong, especially there's just talking about the length. I keep coming back to that. Usually so many times in the tackle class, there's 2 or 3 guys who really profile out as tackles. And then you're talking about people who could kick into guard. But the length and the experience here too. There's so many players who have a ton of snaps at left tackle, and offenses are just passing the ball more and more. So realistically, I would think 5 is the floor for tackles. I think Alt's going to go. Fashanu from Penn State. You're going to Mims is definitely going. If you count Fatanu from Washington, he's definitely going. And then I think Guyton and Suamatia, that's 6 right there. So it can go really quick, and you never know. Some teams can, really sneak up and have a guy that they really like. So I definitely think 6 or 5.
Is there anybody on the interior that you think the Chiefs might, Nick Allegretti looks like he's going to go look for a starting role in free agency. The Chiefs could use some depth along the interior. Is there anybody that jumps out at you as a potential snag in maybe the middle rounds?
Yeah. A name that I like is Tanner Bortolini. Got to get an Italian on the interior. Nick Allegretti to Tanner Bortolini, but he's from Wisconsin. I think most teams are going to look at him as a center, but he's a player who's taken snaps at all 5 positions along the offensive line. Chiefs love that versatility. He's a day 3 guy, I think, probably, but he tested really well. So maybe some team talks himself into it. That's one thing too that I think pans out really well for the Chiefs is there's some really great center talent in this class. Zach Frazier out of West Virginia, Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon is probably going to be a first round pick. Graham Barton from Duke. He's a guy who has a ton of versatility along the offensive line. Most teams are going to look at him as a center too. Chiefs are set there. So that's another, strength of this class, interior offensive line. I think there might be at least 2, maybe 3 taken in the first round. Again, another benefit for the Chiefs who are set in that position.
All right. Well, what about the tight ends? The tight end has not been a big target for the Chiefs because they've got a Hall of Famer in Travis Kelce in the draft. But Blake Bell, long in the tooth. Who knows what's going on with Jody Fortson? Hasn't really ever popped off, taken off. Noah Gray, reliable. Do the Chiefs need to reload a little bit here, start looking for maybe their pass catching tight end of the future? All due respect to Noah Gray, I think he does a certain thing well, and that's probably what he's going to be. Anybody who jumps out at you at that position?
So again, we're talking in the realm of the Chiefs. So Brock Bowers, while incredible, is not going to be an option for the Chiefs. The next guy I have on the board is Jatavian Sanders out of Texas. Honestly, I was a little underwhelmed by his testing. It just wasn't as poppy as I was expecting it to be because he looks more athletic on tape. He's super fluid. Here's the thing about him. He is not going to be a blocker for you. He is more closer to Dalton Kincaid out of Buffalo than, George Kittle, or pick your favorite blocking / pass catching tight end. He's 6'3", 245 pounds. He ran a 4.69 40-yard dash with a 1.59 split at the 10-yard. So, I mean, there's some good explosiveness there, but it didn't pop like I expected it to. He met with the Chiefs as well. I wrote about that on the site this week. So that's another sign that they like him. My role for him, what I could see for him is Kelsey's kind of getting in this place now where he catches a pass and runs to the sideline and catches his breath. That's an opportunity for Sanders to go in. I definitely think that there are scenarios where both players can be on the field. The Chiefs want to run more 13 personnel. That's been an answer that they've had for these 2 high shells for quite some time. Unfortunately, this year they struggled running out of that for most of the regular season. And part of that is because when you put 13 personnel on there, that puts 2 of your receiving options as Blake Bell and Noah Gray. And Noah Gray is great tight end too. I think like Jatavian Sanders is kind of the last shot in this draft to get a true, like, this guy is an offensive weapon, pass catching person that could actually raise the dynamic element to your offense. Another name that some fans are going to be familiar with is Ben Sinnott out of K-State. He tested really well. 6'3", 250 pounds. Again, a little undersized for a classic blocking tight end, but he is a really strong blocker. He's also alignment versatile. Like, he's a player that is kind of lined up in the backfield at times. They do a lot of different stuff with him. If you've watched K-State play, he's a guy who your eyes are going to draw to, because every time he gets the ball, he's at least breaking one tackle. And he's got some zing in the open field too. He's not a guy that's going to be catching like that pass that Travis Kelce caught against the Eagles in the Super Bowl. He's not going to be catching 30-yard fade routes or anything like that. But he is a guy who can be an upgrade over Blake Bell. And both these last two guys I'm talking about, that's what I kind of envision for him. Bring him in, instant upgrade over Blake Bell. Thank you for your time, Blake Bell. You've done well for us. And then Noah Gray, they can step up and replace Noah Gray as well. Another name I've got is AJ Barner out of Michigan. He's a guy who I think might be the best blocker in the class, and that's something that is an instant path to getting on the field. We saw that last year with Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington's a little unique because he was an absolute freak as far as testing goes, but instantly finds the field with the Pittsburgh Steelers because of how strong of a blocker he is in run and pass protection. He is, he takes big, long strides. There's some upside in him as a receiver. I think that it's hard. Anytime you talk about these Michigan pass catchers, like I was kind of putting some clips on Twitter of Cornelius Johnson, a wide receiver from Michigan as well. They struggle. It's just hard to get a good evaluation of him. Barner's an athletic ball of clay right now. He will test well, but I don't think he's necessarily going to be another dynamic receiving option. But there's upside there because he is athletic as hell. So that's kind of how all those Michigan guys are.
Yeah. Any interest in my guy Cade Stover out of Ohio State?
Yeah, Stover is another. I like, that's the thing about this tight end class is it's just not super exciting. I think really you've got those two guys at the top, and then it kind of just gets into what are you looking for. Tip Ryman out of Illinois has tested really, really well as well. Someone in the chat mentioned Theo Johnson out of Penn State. Whatever they've got going on in Happy Valley, man, those guys just test like crazy from Penn State. So there's all sorts of names. Stover, I know, like dealt with an injury this year as well. But I definitely think that this is a place that we could see the Chiefs invest a day 3 or maybe even a late day 2 pick.
Great stuff, man. All right, let's get to the position I know everybody wants to hear about, and that is the wide receiver position. Who are your 3 obtainable guys for the Chiefs there?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think probably one of the biggest winners from the combine this week was Adonai Mitchell out of Texas. He's a guy that a lot of people pretty frequently had mocked to the Chiefs during the season and right after the season was over. He was productive. He won 2 championships with Georgia before moving on to Texas this year. But he tested insanely well. Basically, I've been referencing these percentiles. If you're not familiar with it, you see my Twitter feed's full of the RAS scores, right? Those are basically referring to like what percentage of athlete they are, combining their size, their length, their 40 time, their bench press, whatever. He was a 9.97, so almost a perfect 10 as far as his RAS score. So one of the most athletic wide receivers to ever test. He ran a 4.35 40-yard dash with a 1.54 10-yard split at 205 pounds. That's awesome. And he's still 6 foot too. So he is a true X. He had 845 yards this season, 11 touchdowns. That's something you love to see, is that when he gets the ball, he's scoring. If you watch a lot of Texas, like Quinn Ewers it's a little infuriating to watch sometimes. Same with Xavier Worthy. Not always the most accurate passer, but one criticism of Mitchell has been that, like, if he's not involved in the play, he'll take the play off. There's been some kind of football character questions with him. Dane Brugler reported that he answered most of those questions at the combine. Teams felt good about that, but he, in some ways, you kind of like that in a receiver. It's kind of, the George Pickens debate as to, like, do you want this diva receiver who always wants the ball? But he, to me, is the last guy in the first round that, like, you can see wide receiver 1 material out of. Not that these other guys can't become that in a certain offense, but he's the one that, like, prototype. He has the build and the fit. I think that it'd be a stretch for him to get to 32, but I think that he could be in striking distance for the Chiefs. Another thing I really like about this wide receiver class is that there's just a ton of different varieties here. Like if you want a contested catch guy to go up and get it, they're there. You want burners, you want them, they're there. You want a slot guy who can catch the underneath stuff, they're there. Next name that I'm going to bring up is Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. He is, if you've watched Georgia, he's the guy that people always tweet out like the Bill Belichick binoculars meme too, because like he just felt like a Patriot, like that Wes Welker, Julian Edelman type of player, because he's always open, man. He's one of those guys, like the point of being a wide receiver is to get open and catch the ball. That's what Ladd McConkey does. He's small. He's 5'11", 186 pounds. But if you matched up his RAS with Garrett Wilson's, they were almost identical. So there's a level of explosiveness to there. He still ran a 4.43 40-yard dash. He has inside, and he's not just a slot guy. Like a lot of guys, they see his complexion and like, slot guy. But he can play on the outside as well too. And, a lot of people in the chat have referred to this as well, that like McConkey, the space that's created by Travis Kelce in the center of the field, McConkey is a nightmare to cover in man coverage. So there's just a lot of open space that he's going to eat in that 10-yard, 5 to 10 yard span beyond the line of scrimmage. He's a name that makes a lot of sense. There has been some injury concerns with him. Also, like the average depth of target for him hasn't been incredible. Like he's someone who's kind of relied on yak, but also like that's kind of who the Chiefs are at this point. So he's another player totally different than Adonai Mitchell. Last player I'm going to bring up is Troy Franklin out of Oregon. He is 6'1", 176 pounds, ran a 4.41 40-yard dash. Another guy who tested really well. He's highly productive in college. He is probably, I think he's probably year one could be 2022 MVS as far as what he did for the offense. He is a better route runner than Xavier Worthy is right now. I know a lot of people will bring up Xavier Worthy because of the flashy 40-yard time. I like Franklin. He's 10 pounds heavier, 2 inches taller, and just a tick slower. Tracks the ball great. He's had over 2,400 yards in college, 25 touchdowns. I mean, this is a guy that I think runs an offense that was pretty similar to what the Chiefs do, that spread out West Coast offense. So those are my 3 guys. I would not be surprised if Ladd McConkey or Troy Franklin were there at pick 32. So lots of names to like. And I think just like one more thing that's worth pointing out about the wide receiver class is when that cliff hits it's kind of like the Roman Wilson, Ricky Pearsall line. Those are 2 other guys. Someone just mentioned Xavier Legette. He's another name. Pick 64, if the Chiefs are to stay there and try to take a wide receiver, it gets pretty hairy. I'm not sure that they want to wait that long. They kind of did that last year where they traded up for Rashee Rice before a huge line hit. It's noteworthy that the last wide receiver taken in the second round was Sky Moore, the year that they took Sky Moore, and the results have kind of yielded that as well. So, there's a lot to like here, though.
Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of speed in this class. A lot of speed. These guys can move. I think it's interesting, man. And if you guys want to check out, like I know I say this every year, but head over to NFL.com and their combine tracker. If you weren't able, like, if you're not a big tape guy, you don't have time to break down tape and watch these guys. And the combine's on for like a week straight. It's a lot to take in, and it's a big time commitment. If you go to NFL.com/combine/tracker, they've got an analyst over there who breaks everybody down, and you can sort of see how they've got them ranked and graded, and you can dive in and read a scouting report on all the top prospects, and they even have videos of their combine performance. So you can watch them run the 40, you can watch them run some drills, get in, get out. And if you're interested, you want to be a little bit more invested in who develop your own opinions of who you like and who you think the Chiefs should take and that you want to find out more about. It's just like a great crib notes to kind of catch up on some of these guys. They do all the work for you. It's all free. It's not behind a paywall. So head on over there and check it out, and you can get to know a lot more about these guys. It's an excellent resource for me because Lord knows I don't have time to sit down and watch the tape. That's why I've got Price.
And like to your point, like one thing that's really healthy exercise to do, develop those opinions, find your guys, and then when it comes time for the Chiefs to pick, write down who you're going to pick, and then go back in a year later and see how smart or how stupid you look. Like I was all about Puka Nacua last year, all throughout the draft process, and that receipt came through. But also, like, there's other names that I wrote down that like probably wouldn't have panned out very well. So it's not as easy as it looks, for sure, but it's fun to follow.
Boy, can you imagine if we drafted Puka Nacua? with Patrick
He went to
Mahomes.
the perfect landing spot. I don't even know if he'd be as good as he was with the Chiefs. The Rams, he literally used to train with Cooper Kupp's wide receiver coach. It was a perfect landing spot for him, but he took advantage of the opportunity he had.
Yeah, man, just what a season. What a cool season. A great story. All right, real quick before we get out of here, are there any running backs? Now, I'm not a big draft running back high guy, but I do think, as much as I love Isaiah Pacheco, like I think they need more at the running back position. Do you think the Chiefs should invest a draft pick in a running back at all? Or should they keep doing their thing where they just, a very late pick or free agent type guys that they bring in to stack up on that depth?
I definitely think that their goal this year should be to make the offense more dynamic. Right now, the Chiefs do not have a true super dynamic home run hitting running back. I love Isaiah Pacheco. I think he is a very effective player. It's very clear that when he took over the starting role, the offense improved. He is not always the best with his vision, and also there's some injury concerns there. He just plays a super physical type of game. He's already dealt with injuries. The Chiefs have to be able to prepare for what life looks like without Isaiah Pacheco. Clyde Edwards-Helaire filled in notably this year whenever he had to, but there definitely was something left to be desired there. And then, we've already kind of talked about Jerick McKinnon, and he can't be relied on very much anymore. So I think that this is a real easy place for the Chiefs to improve how dynamic they are on offense. You think back to what the offenses looked like at times with Damian Williams, with, Kareem Hunt for those games. I think that that's a part of this game that could be unlocked more. With that being said, there's a ton of names in free agency as well. My opinion is this. I know a lot of Chiefs fans love to say, well, just, grab another running back in the 7th round. It's so easy. The Chiefs, that is the exception, not the rule. There's a lot of, go look at the Chargers and how many day 2 running backs they've picked that all just flop. Now, I know it's the Chargers and we think they're just, inept at everything, but it's not as easy as you think it is. There's a lot of day 2, day 3 running backs that don't really do ever anything. The point of this is to draft good players. There's a lot of people who, clown the Lions for taking a 1st round running back, and that turned out pretty good for them this year. So as long as the player is the right player, it doesn't matter. So to that point, like one name that I think could go day 2, maybe even the 2nd round, is Jalen Wright out of Tennessee. He is quick. He is versatile. He catches the ball well. He just has another top gear. He's probably the fastest back in the class. On tape, Isaiah, I can't remember his last name, Guerrero from Louisville. He was very, very quick in the 40-yard dash, a little bit quicker than him, but Jalen Wright, he's a guy that would just look so great in an Andy Reid offense. He runs zone really well. He's the classic, give him an inch, he's going to get a mile type of player. He is also really solid in pass protection, which is pretty unusual for a running back in college. A lot of times you get the pretty strong receiving back, but not a great pass protector. He's really pretty solid in pass protection. Trey Benson. So all 3 of these guys too, I think these are guys that if Isaiah Pacheco goes down, you can rely on them to carry the ball for, 2 or 3 games and not have a significant drop off. And right now that's absolutely where the Chiefs are, where there's just a significant drop off. Trey Benson, Florida State. He's another guy. He's a little bit bigger, 6'2", 212 pounds, another strong tester, a 97% athlete. He kind of puts up some of the broken shed tackle numbers that Kareem Hunt did. That was a number that a lot of people pointed to with Kareem Hunt out of Toledo, was how well he went. He never went down after first contact. He has some of those numbers. He was a transfer from Oregon. He had 33 catches over the last 2 years. There's some issues with him about short yardage, which, at that point, just make him a Chief, right? If he struggles to get short yardage, then, you are a Kansas City Chief.
Ready made.
And then last name is Will Shipley out of Clemson. He did not test because he's still rehabbing a knee injury that he played, even though he's going to the draft, he played in his college bowl game with a knee injury dinged up. So that's something that is really gritty and tough. He's probably the best pass catching running back in this class. He models his game after Christian McCaffrey. His complexion is similar as well. So there will be some comparisons to Christian McCaffrey. Reported to have run a 4.42 40-yard dash. So that's pretty quick. He's got 85 receptions in college, which is pretty unusual for a college back. And that's with him missing some time this year. And he's another guy that for the Chiefs wide receivers or the Chiefs running back, I want them to be able to get to open hole and score. Like that's the big thing, because the Chiefs running game can generate those type of holes because of what they do in the passing game. He's another guy that if he gets an open lane, he can take it to the house. He's not a big in between the tackle guy, but that's not necessarily what they need here. They have that hammer in Isaiah Pacheco. So overall, it's a down running back class. I didn't mention Jonathan Brooks out of Texas. He has a chance to be the first running back taken. He's rehabbing an ACL injury. Texas just generates incredible running backs every year with like Bijan, Roshan Johnson. Obviously, the Chiefs had Jamal Charles. That was a while back ago. But he has a chance to be first running back taken. I don't necessarily think he makes sense for the Chiefs anyway, because he is rehabbing that injury. And quite frankly, I think they need a guy who can come in and contribute right away.
Yeah. Well, this was fantastic, man. What a breakdown. I hope everybody feels a lot smarter after listening to Price. You can read his work, obviously, on arrowheadaddict.com, so make sure you head over there. He's managing the big board over there, so you can see as we continue to go through the process, the evaluation. And you're on paternity leave, so you're going to be what, changing diapers and watching tape, right?
What more could you ask for, right? Yeah, I got to figure out that balance. We got the baby swing, so we'll work it out. I like having my big monitors down here in the basement, but I'll work it out. But yeah, I really want to start digging into some of those kind of day 2, day 3 guys. I'm definitely familiar with kind of the players that are on the board, but definitely got a lot more to watch. And this is the most exciting time, especially because once we get this free agency, like there's a chance the Chiefs make a move at left tackle, and then you just don't have to worry about that position anymore for the Chiefs. But yeah, very exciting. Looking forward to it.
Our kids are going to be relatively close in age. We're going to have to set up like a baby combine when they start crawling. 10 feet, maybe 10-foot dash.
Yeah. Arrowhead Addict combine right there.
Yeah, Daddick. I like that. Fantastic. Price, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate you. Thank you to all of our members. Everybody who's out there, if you're interested in becoming a part of the Arrowhead Addict community, make sure you hit that like button and check the link in the description, because there's all kinds of ways to support the show. And we'll be bringing Price back. We're obviously going to want to hear what he's thinking about the defensive side of the ball. But for now, study these guys he mentioned, see what you think, come back and let us know how you feel, and buckle up for free agency next week. St. Patty's Day. It's going to be a heck of a week, man. I can't wait. All right, everybody. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thank you to Price. Thank you to producer Richard. We will see you right back here next week for our regular slate of shows. But until then, as always, go Chiefs.